Hello, and welcome to Bonner Spring High School's production of The Importance of Being Earnest. I'm Tim Hoffman, the director of the play. I first need to acknowledge that this has been a very tough year for theater in general, and especially for Bonner Springs. We have tried in the past to produce live work as often as we can, and this year we wanted to continue that tradition, but being physically distanced produced its own challenges. What you will see tonight is actually a production that we have performed live, but recorded so that it's easier to distribute. You will see that the students are in their own little squares on a Zoom call. Although this isn't traditional theater, it is theater nonetheless. So please enjoy what you see. I would also like to thank Bill Turley for loaning us all of his practice rooms so that we could have our students record in the building, but be physically distanced and safe. Next, I would like to thank Rick Mullen for doing all that he could to help ensure that this play could be produced this year and that the cast and myself and Miss Suki were able to be safe while doing it. I would like to thank Lauren Suki for being the assistant director, really the second director for this piece. She did as much work as I did, and the effort that you see put forth by the students can be attributed to her as well. And finally, I would like to thank the cast. These 8 students who have worked incredibly hard over the past few weeks, dedicated not only their time, but their emotional energy to this product that you will hopefully enjoy. And without them, this couldn't be possible. And finally, I would like to thank you for dedicating some of your time to watch our production. Even though it's not traditional theater in its format, it's still theater, and we still appreciate all of your support. And without further ado, I present to you Bonner Spring High School's production of The Importance of Being Earnest.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell yet?
Yes, sir. Yours has been delivered, sir.
Oh! By the way, Lane, I see that from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shawman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are having been entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take a slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one entertains oneself. When one is in the country, one entertains other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Why, yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why all the cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well. However, I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear boy. The divorce court was specially designed for those whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven.
Lane, bring me one of those delicious-looking sandwiches.
Please don't touch
Sir.
the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you've been eating all the time.
That is for a different matter. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it must be, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you're going to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. They don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you'll have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily. What on earth do you mean, Algernon? What do you mean by Cecily?
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
You mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? Oh, I wish to goodness you'd said something about it. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard. I was nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There's no good in offering a large reward now the thing is found.
I must say, I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest. However, it makes no difference, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you have no right whatsoever to read what's written on the inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read, a private cigarette
it is
case.
absurd to have such a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't.
I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is from the present of someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. She lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back, Algie.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
What is there with that boy? Some ants are tall, some ants are not tall. That is surely a thing that an ant may be able to decide for herself. And you think that every ant must be like your ant. It's absurd. For heaven's sake, just give me back my cigarette case.
But why does your aunt call you her dear uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was in it. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my whole life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and it's Jack in the country, and that cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but it does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tonbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come on, old boy. You had much better have the thing out at once.
Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on, tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, promise to give me back my cigarette case.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
There is nothing improbable about it, dear boy. In fact, it's quite ordinary. You see, old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter Cecily. Cecily, who refers to me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the care of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not invited. I will tell you quite candidly that it is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Algie, I don't think you would understand my real motives. You are hardly mature enough. When one has been placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. And a very high moral tone is not conducive to one's health or one's happiness. I have pretended to have a brother named Ernest who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful of scrapes. That, dear boy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very, very tedious if it were either, and modern literature, a complete impossibility.
Now that wouldn't be a bad thing, would it?
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. Leave it to the people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you are a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented a perfectly invaluable, dreadful invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I have really had plans with Aunt Augusta for more than a week now.
I haven't asked you to dine anywhere with me tonight.
I know! You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys someone so much as not receiving an invitation.
You much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I've already dined there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and either sent down with no woman at all, or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well who she would place me next to tonight. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her husband from across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know that you are to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you about all the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I am going to kill my brother. In fact, I might kill him in any case. Cecily has grown too far attached to him. So, I'm going to kill my brother, and I suggest you do the same with Mr. With your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to depart with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be quite glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a sweet, charming, refined girl like Gwendolen, and she's the only girl in the world that I've ever wanted to marry, then I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, dear boy, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sakes, don't be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in the Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you may have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
Oh, I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell, Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, those two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
Quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we were a little late, Algernon, but I felt obliged to call on Miss Lady Harbury. I hadn't seen her since her poor husband's death. I never seen a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Lane!
Won't you come here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches?
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about the no being cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to set you down with Miss Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight, after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly to say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I've just had a text come in to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to a poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you were to ask Mr. Bunbury for me to not have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone's practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you that he'll be all right by Saturday. The music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you will kindly come into the next room with me for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People seem to think they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe it so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be able to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room which I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I've met you, I've loved you more than any other girl, I mean, woman, that I've ever met since I've met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that, in public at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. Oh, there is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me?
Passionately.
Gwendolen, you have no idea how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Well, yes, but suppose it was something else. Do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, there's very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, I don't really like the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
Oh, it suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, surely there are many more nicer names, I think. Jack, for instance, is a very charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you're not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched on.
Well, then, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it is only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
How you know what I've got to say to you?
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Oh, of course I would, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
Oh, my own love, I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite, quite blue. I hope you always look at me just like that, especially when other people are present.
Mr. Worthing! Why, sir, from the semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mama, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Pardon me. You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolen? Gwendolen, the carriage!
Yes, Mama.
You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, though I have the same list as dear Duchess of Fulton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm fully ready to enter your name should your answer be what your really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Yes, I must admit, I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I've always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell?
I'm pleased to hear it. I don't approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes, and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 3 and 4 million a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected from one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land that ceases to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position but prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I do own a house in the country. It has some land attached to it, of course, about 150 acres, I believe. But I don't rely on it for any real income. As far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones who can make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? So that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope? A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is lent to the year to Lady Bloxham, your Lady Bracknell. Lady Bloxham is who is renting it out. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like, at a 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she's a lady considerably advanced in her years. She goes about very little.
Ah, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something, however, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. Now on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both of my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I had said that I had lost my parents. It would be the nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an older gentleman of very kindly and generous disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, for he had a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a seaside resort in Sussex.
And where did the charitable gentleman who had this first-class ticket for the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was found in a handbag, a somewhat large brown leather handbag with handles to it, an ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom of Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that displays the worst excess of the French Revolution. And I'm sure you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has before now been used for this purpose most likely, but could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
Then why I ask what you want me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to at any rate produce one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't know how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in the cloakroom at my home. Surely that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has this to do with me? We can hardly imagine that I, Lord Bracknell, would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worth.
Good morning.
Goodness
Sakes, don't play that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? Oh, you don't mean to say Gwendolen refused you? I know it's the way she has. She's always refusing people.
Gwendolen
It's
is
ill-natured of her.
Gwendolen is as right as a trivet. As far as she's concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm sure she is one. Overall, she's a monster without the myth, and that's perfectly unfair. I beg your pardon. I suppose I shouldn't talk to you about your own aunts before you like that.
My dear boy. I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are a simple, tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct of when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I don't want to argue about it with you. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
If I had thought that, by my word, I'd shoot myself. You don't think that Gwendolen will become like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his. By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
The truth isn't exactly the type of thing you tell to a nice, sweet, refined girl like that. What ideas you have to behave to a woman?
The only way to behave to a woman is to show her a good time if she is pretty, and to show someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, by the end of the week I'll have gotten rid of him. I'll say he died. In Paris, of apoplexy. Many people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say severe chill.
Are you sure a severe chill isn't hereditary?
Of course it isn't.
Very well. Oh, my poor brother Ernest, carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much attached to your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
I'm glad to say that Cecily is not a silly romantic girl. She's got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention to any of her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolen yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
That's not the type of thing that one blurts out to people. And besides, I'm sure that Gwendolen and Cecily are bound to be the best of friends. I'll bet you anything you like. After half an hour after they've met, and they will be calling each other sisters.
Women only do that after they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theater?
No, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club?
No, I hate talking.
Well, we might trot round to the Empire at 10?
No, I hate looking at things. It's so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work when there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing. Earmuff, dear.
Really, Gwendolen, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she could possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There's good internet, I suppose? It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
I will wait for you for all of my life, if you're not too long.
How long do you remain in town?
Until Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
Oh, thanks. I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my darling?
Certainly.
I will take Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir. Sir, I've left letters at your door.
Send up a glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can pack up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Now there is a sweet, simple, refined girl, the only girl I've ever loved in my entire life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury. That's all.
You better take care of your friend Bunbury. It'll get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only thing that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily, surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than your own, especially the moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will be repeating yesterday's lesson.
I don't like German. It isn't only becoming language. I know perfectly well that it'll look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way, and he laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Oh, dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is to especially be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one else who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose it is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life, and idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence of him, Miss Prism. I am sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I'm not sure that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure I would desire to reclaim him at all. I'm not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As man sows, so let them reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order into the wonderful secrets of my life. If I don't write them all down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe memory is responsible for nearly all the 3 volumes that Muddy sends us.
Do not speak slightly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels unhappily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was, unfortunately, abandoned. I use the term in the sense of a lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
I thought I saw Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning, Miss Prism? You are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so good to have a short stroll through the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking of that, not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Ujira and her pupil any longer.
Ujira, my name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I find, dear Doctor, that I'd like to have a chat with you. I find that I actually have a headache after all, and it might do me some good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee, you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their own melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just here from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Uncle Jack's brother? Did you tell Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism went studies, and he said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you'd have better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
Oh, I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does.
You were little Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm usually tall for my age. But I am Cecily. You, I've been told, are Uncle Jack's brother Ernest. A very wicked Ernest.
Oh, I'm not wicked at all, Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being wicked all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, so I'm sure it was very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go out by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you'd better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak with you about your immigrating.
About my what?
You're immigrating. He has gone up to buy your outfit.
Oh, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit at all. He has no taste in neckties.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia! I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you'll have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I've received for Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging, Cecily. This world is good enough for me.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm afraid I had no time this afternoon.
Then, well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. Yes, I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you dine with me?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have an appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marshall Neal?
No, I'd much sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cecily.
I don't think it'd be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I care to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about. Shall we go dine?
Of course.
You're much too alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I could understand. A womanthrope never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously why. The primitive church has not lasted up to the present day, and you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should really be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended upon, and ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally, of course. My metaphor was drawn from fruit. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she just stepped out.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagances.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother, Ernest, is dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but this is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I received a call from the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so let him reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am very particular susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or as in this present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest, celebrations, christenings, confirmation, on days of humiliation and festival days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity upper sermon for the Society of Discontent among the upper orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble, you mentioned christenings, I believe. I assume you know how to christen all right? I mean, you are continually christening, are you not?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they do not seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
Those who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But the matter is, Dr. Chasuble, there is no child I would like to be christened. I am very fond of children, but I would like to be christened myself this afternoon if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already?
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to. Unless you believe that I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot round about 5 o'clock if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have two similar ceremonies to perform at the time. A case of twins that occurred at an outlying cottage on property of your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
No, but I shouldn't be christened alongside of the children. It'd be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into the house of sorrow. I merely beg you to not be too much bowed down by grief, what seem to us often bitter trials, are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes do you have got on? Do go and change them.
Cecily!
Child!
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you have a toothache, and I have such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out and greet him kindly, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
And after we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me particularly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what to make of it. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother Jack, I've come down from town to tell you that I am terribly sorry for all the trouble that I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hospitality.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. His coming down here is perfectly disgraceful. He knows well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he has been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury in his terrible state of health.
Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else anymore. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit the faults were all on my side, but I must say that I think Brother Jack's coldness to me is particularly painful. Especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not speak with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Very well, then. It shall be the last time I ever do. Hello. Ernest.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you'll come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We mustn't be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Alge! You must get out of this place at once! I'm not allowing Bunbury in here.
I will unpack Mr. Ernest's things and put him in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right?
What?
His luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put him in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I've not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call for me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You're not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is who is actually staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave. By the 4:05 train.
I certainly wouldn't leave you so long as you're in mourning. I should think of it very unkind if I did. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. It should be very, very unkind if you did.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, in any case, it's better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct is an outrage, and your presence in my garden is utterly absurd. But you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This bun-burying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must speak to her before I go and arrange the plans for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to check on the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced to is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite openly and frankly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? Oh, I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you'll order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I've reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell the sound you just made.
Cecily, ever since I first laid my eyes upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on until next week at the same hour.
I don't care for Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world. But you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy! Of course! Why, we've been engaged for the last 9 months.
For the last 9 months?
Yes, it would be exactly 10 months on the 14th.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us he had a younger brother, who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, had formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him, after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by entire ignorance of my existence, I determined no matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under that dear old tree over there. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name. And this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I always promised you to wear.
Did I get you this? Oh, it is very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I was given you for leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But, my own dear sweet, I haven't written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was supposed to write your letters for you. I was wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They'd make you too far conceited. The three I wrote you after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I could hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was! On the 22nd of last March. You can hear the intro if you'd like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But what had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt to hear that you had broken off our engagement, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It wouldn't have been a really serious engagement if it had been broken off at least once, but I forgave before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
My dear romantic boy, I hope your hair comes naturally. Does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. Just something in that name seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband's name is not called Ernest.
But, my own sweet Cecily, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own sweet Cecily, I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not a bad name at all. In fact, it is a rather an aristocratic name. Half of the chaps down at the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear that I'm unable to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your right to hear is, I'm suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the practices of rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh yes, Dr. Chasuble's a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on most important christening. I mean on most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since February the 14th, and that I've only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard for you to leave me so long as a period of half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax was just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
No, Mr. Worthing went over the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose. One of the many good elderly women who is associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it's so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? Oh, what a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short time. Please, feel free to relax.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My name is Gwendolen Fairfax. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Pop, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. My mama, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is a part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no! I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no. I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed?
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you. But I'm bound to state that now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish you were fully 42, and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less endangered history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who's my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they've not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Oh, Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolen, there's no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our county newspaper should chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify this incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress to me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I'm bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gone into, I will never reapproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? There's no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I'm glad to say that I've never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose it is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept estate this is, Miss Cardew.
So, lad, you like it, Miss Fairfax?
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
This is what the newspapers call agriculture depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just as present. It is almost an epidemic among them, I've been told. How do you take your tea, Miss Fairfax?
Yes, thank you.
Do you take sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar's not fashionable anymore.
Merriman, 4 lumps of sugar, please. Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Merriman, Miss Fairfax has requested cake with her tea. See to it.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you would have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any girl, there are no links to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such manners. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolen, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you engaged to be married to this young lady?
The dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is that prison around your waist is my guardian, Mr. Jack Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
This is Ernest.
Cecily, my own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what, young lady? Whoa, good heavens, Gwendolen!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen. I mean to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrieff.
Algernon Moncrieff? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh!
Is your name really Jack?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name is Jack. It has been Jack for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wrong Gwendolen.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Welling, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is of some importance for us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it brings me great pain to be forced to speak the truth, and I've never really been forced to be put in a painful position, and quite frankly, I'm inexperienced at it. But I will say quite candidly that I have no brother Ernest. I've never had a brother. I have no intention of having a brother, and I never will have a brother. No brother.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
No, not of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us are engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose?
Yes. And a perfectly wonderful bunbury. It is the most wonderful bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to bunbury here.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about that. Every serious bunburyist knows that they can bunbury wherever they choose.
Serious bunburyist? Good heavens!
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction that I get out of the whole of this mess is that your friend Bunbury quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country as often as you used to, dear boy, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to come up to London quite as often as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, refined girl like that is quite inexcusable, not ignoring the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense at all for your seeming a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I just wanted to be married to Gwendolen, that is all.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew now.
And I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there, calmly eating muffins, or in the middle of this horrible trouble, I will never understand. You seem perfectly heartless to me.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It's the only way to eat them.
I think it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in great trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that doesn't mean you need to eat them in all that greedy way. I'll have Merriman retrieve them from you.
I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
I suppose a man made his own muffins in his own house.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algernon, why don't you go?
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It is absurd. I never go anywhere without my dinner. Nobody ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened under the name of Ernest at 5:45.
The sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I have already made arrangements to be christened myself at 5:30. And I will naturally be taking the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. And besides, I have all the right to be christened as I like. You see, I have never been christened, and Dr. Chasuble agrees. Now, you are an entirely different case. You've been christened already!
Yes, but I have not been christened for many years.
Yes, but you've been christened. That's the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. I must say, I think it is rather dangerous of your venturing on being christened if you are quite unsure if you've been christened before. It might make you very unwell. I need hardly to remind you that someone very closely connected to you was very nearly carried off in Paris earlier this week by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill isn't hereditary.
I know I usedn't to say it, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
That is nonsense. You always talk nonsense. Merriman, the muffins!
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins. Besides, there are only 2 left.
I hate tea cake.
Tea cake? But then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas of hospitality you have.
Algernon! I don't want you here. I've already told you to go. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And besides, there are still 2 muffins left.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
I hear they've been eating muffins. That sounds like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us. Oh, couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery!
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrieff, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I may have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the moment for German skepticism. The explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrieff said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could I say it? I don't mind being unpleasant.
An excellent idea. Will you take the time for me?
Certainly.
1, 2, 3.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? Well, we're going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you were prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing. Darling Ernest!
Darling Cecily!
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens!
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Sit down! Sit down immediately! Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, by my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I'm glad to say, under the impression that she's attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. In fact, I've never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But you must understand, Mr. Worthing, that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment forward. On this point, as I am on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was... Muffin? Oh, exploded! He was quite exploded!
Exploded? Ha! Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, what I mean is he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean, so Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he's finally come to some conclusion and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we've finally gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding in what seems to me a most unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
The Moncrieff and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything particularly exciting in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the amount of engagement that goes on seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics are laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Before now, I had no idea there were any persons or families whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149th Belgrave Square, Southwest Jervis Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Fifshire, North Britain.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof do I have of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby? A firm of the highest position in their profession. Indeed, I'm told that one of the Mr. Markbys is to occasionally be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. I also have in my possession, you'll be pleased to hear, the certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, and the measles, both in the German and English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see. Though somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I'd better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, just about £130 million in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130 million? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to me a much attractive young lady now that I look at her. Indeed, there are many women who have really solid qualities, but Miss Cardew seems much unique. Well, come closer, dear. How... Yes, your dress is sadly simple, but your hair is as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all of that. A thoroughly experienced French maid can produce really marvelous results in a very brief space of time. I once recommended one to Lady Lansing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn around, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. Chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, prettiest, dearest girl I have ever saw in my life, and I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, I hope you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. In fact, when I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment to allow that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta!
Cecily, you may relax.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The wedding, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Aunt
Aunt
Augusta!
To speak frankly, I'm not in favor of long engagements. They give people the time to figure out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but according to Mr. Thomas Cardew's will, I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot get married without my consent. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your own nephew. However, I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible! He's an Oxonian.
I'm afraid there can be no doubt about it. You see, during my trip to London yesterday on an important question of romance, he obtained admission into my house under the false pretense of being my brother. Under the assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier-Jouet brut wine that I was specifically serving for myself. Now, under the assumed name, he also alienated the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed at tea and devoured every single muffin. He's also well aware from the start that I have no brother. I have never had a brother, and I have no intention on having a brother in the future. I told him so distinctly myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct of you.
How very kind of you, Lady Bracknell, but my opinion is unaltered. I decline to give my consent.
Come closer, dear. How old are you?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always went to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should be quite accurate about her age. You look so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be long before you have age and free from the restraints of tutelage, so I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me again for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell. However, according to Mr. Cardew's will, Cecily does not come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. There are many women of the highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. I see no reason why our dear Cecily would not be even still more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
You know I could, Cecily. Of course I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrieff.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I must beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the entire matter is in your own hand. The moment you consent to myself and Gwendolen's marriage, I will gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must know that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is the only thing that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, you've already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon never forbid you to be baptized, and will not hear of such excess. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that that was in which the way you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there will be no christenings at all this afternoon?
As the way things are now, Dr. Chasuble, I don't think it's very important to either myself or Ernest at this point.
Oh, I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I've refuted in 4 my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems one particularly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I've just been informed by the Pew Opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in her household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She has been informed.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting there for you for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Look here, Prism! Prism! Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of a more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism! Where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning, the day you mentioned, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I planned as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator, and I had also with me a somewhat old but a capricious handbag in which I had intended to place a work of fiction I'd been writing during my few unoccupied hours, and in a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit that handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Oh, this is a matter of no small importance to me, Miss Prism. I insist on knowing where you deposited that handbag.
One of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. You must know that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They're hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if you were having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They're always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I do hope he comes to some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the time, Miss Prism? Oh, please, examine it before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
Yes, it seems to be mine. Oh, yes, right there is an injury it received through an upsetting at a Grower Street omnibus in much younger and happier days. And right there in the lining is a stain it received through an explosion of a temperance beverage that happened at the Leamington. And right there on the lock are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I'd had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm so grateful to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It's been great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You're the baby?
Yes, mother!
Oh, Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I cannot deny that is a serious blow, but who has the right to cast stones against those who have suffered? Cannot repentance pay for an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Oh, Miss Prism, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. She is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell. I don't mean to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrieff, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. How could any of you have doubted? I've always said that I've had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I have a brother? Algy, you young scoundrel, you'll have to treat me with more respect in the future. You've never behaved like a brother to me in all my life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
Jack, my love. But what love are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
I quite forgot that point. I suppose your decision on my name is irrevocable?
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then we must get this settled at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. When I was deposited in that handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Oh, then I was christened. That is settled. Oh, now give me the worst. What was my Christian name?
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the General's Christian name was, though I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was due to the Indian climate, and marriage, and indigestion, and other things of the kind.
Algernon, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was even a year old.
His name would appear on the military lists for the last 40 years. Would you think so?
The man was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
Well, the military directories of the last 40 years, I hear. Oh, these delightful records should have been my constant study. Here we go. Generals. Malum, Moxman, Migley, what gasoline does they have? Moncrieff, Lieutenant Colonel 1980, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel General 1999, Christian name. Ernest Jack. And my name is Ernest after all. I always said my name was Ernest. Well, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now that the General was called Ernest. I know I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest! I knew from the first that you could have no other name.
Oh, Gwendolen, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out that after all his life he had been speaking nothing but the truth. Oh, could you ever forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
But Cecily, at last!
Ernest! Algernon!
Dr. Chasuble.
Miss Prism?
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
Oh, on the contrary, Aunt Augusta. I finally realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
For this production, we have Zach Stoddard as Jack Worthy, Grace VanBrocklin as Gwendolen Fairfax, Ian Tomasic as Algernon Moncrieff, Jenna Knight as Cecily Cardew, Faith Trahan as Lady Bracknell, Wyatt Barrett as Reverend Chasuble, Tara White as Miss Prism, Aubrey Villarreal as Lane and Merriman,